Thank you so much, Chip, for joining me. I don't feel like you need much of an introduction to my local listeners, but I will introduce you this morning. This is Chip Pickering. He is the CEO of INCOMPAS, the leading trade association that advocates for competition policy across all networks. He is a telecom executive and very well known here in Mississippi, but let's assume that some of our listeners don't know who you are. Do you mind just introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your path to where you are now at INCOMPAS?
Sure, Lauren, it's good to be with you, and thank you for doing the podcast. So as you said, I'm Chip Pickering. I'm CEO of INCOMPAS, but my path to my current position really goes back 30 years, beginning to work in Washington for the first President Bush and his administration. Then I joined Trent Lott's staff, and then I eventually ran for Congress and served the 3rd District of Mississippi for 12 years from 1997 to 2008. But when I was on Senator Lott's staff, it was early 90s, mid 90s. And our country, with a Republican Congress and a Democrat president then, Bill Clinton and Trent Lott from Mississippi, really began to modernize and reform each sector of our economy's public laws and legislation and policies. And one of those areas was the Telecommunications Act of 1996. And as a staffer, I worked for approximately 4 years as we began to negotiate and change Depression era laws that were meant for monopoly telecommunications policy and transforming that into competitive policy so that everyone could enter the market, compete, the competitive networks could interconnect with each other so that consumers would have a choice, whether it was way back, if you can remember, the long distance competition. And then as we began local competition, and then it transformed into internet-based competition and wireless competition. And so those early days of changing public policy, working for Senator Lott, and then when I was in Congress, I was on the committee that had the jurisdiction over telecommunications and the internet and technology. I resigned I didn't run again in 2008. Went into a government relations firm 2008 to 2013 with my good friend Henry Barber. We had a firm that was across the Southeast and in Washington, and we represented a lot of the major companies in Mississippi, but around the country. And I continued to represent clients in the tech and telecommunications space, both wired and wireless. And in 2014, I started as CEO of INCOMPAS, so almost 9 years. And we've had a great ride of being able to transform who we are, rebrand, redefine, and reposition, restructure for the future, building off a great history. 40 years, INCOMPAS is 40 years old, now 41 years old. And we've been at the forefront in each decade of from the 80s to today, of the different phases of competition and telecom technology and the internet. And so I'd love to talk to you today about how we got where we are and the challenges, the struggles, and hopefully some of the wins and victories of being able to make the changes when we needed to.
Yes, we want to hear both because it's important to be realistic, but also encourage leaders out there. I do have a question. It's a little off script, but I'm just curious because I get asked this question as one of the few women in tech in Mississippi. I know you don't, when you're a kid, you don't sit there and think, man, I want to be in technology. I want to be a technology leader. And maybe you did have aspirations to be in politics. I don't know, but what is it about the industry, or when did you because you've really made a name for yourself in, telecommunications, not just in Mississippi, but all over the country. So at what point, did you, I hate to say fall in love with technology, but, at what point did you realize this is not just, what I'm doing, professionally, but really make a career out of it?
Yeah, it's a good question, because if you had asked me as I grew up in Laurel, Mississippi, one day would you be in the telecommunications technology and what we now know as the internet, we really didn't
Right.
know as I
Right.
was growing up. So this, I never would have said this is my field, my career, and my path as I grew up. I did grow up in politics. My dad was in the state legislature. He ran for statewide office. He was an early leader of the Mississippi Republican Party. So I did grow up in politics. And so I knew that. And now I have to say, I rebelled from it. I said, that's the last thing I will ever do. But then,
Right. Never
as,
say never. Never say never.
so as, and as I finished Ole Miss, I went overseas for 2 years to Budapest, Hungary. And I lived in what was then the Soviet bloc. And it really challenged my, my belief system, both what makes America distinct and unique and great, as far as free markets and democracy versus monopoly, government controlled, centralized planning, and the limitations on all forms of human individual freedom. And so it really was a defining moment as a young adult, just getting started after school. Went to Baylor, did an MBA, and then went to Washington. And I was working in trade policy. And as I went to Senator Lott's staff, my first responsibilities were trying to reform energy policy and telecommunications policy. And both of those were based on monopoly policy. And I'm thinking, I just left the Soviet bloc where monopolies were required. How did America start having, in the Depression, monopoly policies that would limit freedom, limit competition, limit innovation? And it just really captured my imagination, and everything was changing so rapidly. It gave me a sense, this is the future.
Right.
And if I can be a part of it, this is the greatest, change in American economy that I could ever participate in. And so it really captured my imagination and passion at that early adult period of my life.
And that's, I would say, the fact that here we are, however many years later, and it's still to this day an ever moving, ever evolving industry. So and you're, helping lead and pave the way for so many organizations to learn. And I want to talk about the INCOMPAS show coming up here in just a minute. But
Laura, I do want to add, Mississippi was on the forefront of all the big changes in telecommunications in the 80s and the 90s. A small company called LDDS grew into WorldCom at one point was the largest internet backbone company in the world, out of Jackson, Mississippi. And then we had SkyTel. So the birth of texting, the two-way paging, which was a experimental pioneer license that I worked on as a staffer for Senator Lott for this Mississippi-based company. It really transformed and then went into the cellular industry and changed the way that we communicate through texting. But that was Mississippi-based, Mississippi developed. And then we had Comcast, which started in Tupelo, Mississippi in the 60s and became the largest cable company, not only in the country, but in the world. All of these things started in Mississippi and had roots and relationships. My father was the first attorney for Comcast.
Oh, really?
Back in the 60s.
That's great. And, I'm glad that you said that, because I know that typically when, I tell people what I do and where I'm from, there's usually, a bit of, a surprise factor. Oh, you're from Mississippi and you're leading a tech marketing, firm. But also I consider, I was grateful enough to be a part of SmartSync, that I consider one of Mississippi's technology success stories. And they utilized a lot of this technology that Mississippi was birthing for their products. So yes, I totally.
And what people don't realize is a lot of time in smaller markets, entrepreneurs and innovators can test a new technology, and they can take risks that maybe the larger companies in larger places are too bureaucratic or too slow or will adapt later. But they come into being through the small markets and the small places in the rural areas of our country. And so never think because we're from Mississippi, or if you're in a small state somewhere or a small town, that you don't come up with, what becomes either the birth of texting, the
Right.
internet backbone, the cable industry, the ceasefire. We've had so many different entrepreneurs,
Right.
Billy Munger and Wirt Yeager and the wireless, Stacy Davidson,
Yep.
all early pioneers in the cellular and wireless industry.
Yep.
So in every part of telecommunications, we have a pioneer that we can point to that started their work in Mississippi.
And trace back here. That is a very important point. I love that. Thank you. So let's shift back to INCOMPAS. That used to be when you started in January of 14. Is that right? When you went to INCOMPAS, it was not INCOMPAS. So I would love to just hear the journey about how, not only now are you guys helping at INCOMPAS, helping other organizations along their growth path, whether they're large organizations or small, but you had some changing to do to position at the time CompTel into what you knew it had the potential to be. So can you just talk through that and the whys behind the rebrand?
So in 2014, we're approaching the 20th anniversary of the 1996 Telecommunications Act, and really a policy that was started, based on the long distance competition, and then bringing that into local markets and the CLEC, or the competitive local exchange companies, which then define the next, the 90s and the first decade of the 2000s. The laws and regulatory policies were beginning to change, and competition in the marketplace and the technologies and the networks were all changing. And something that was what I thought was limiting competitive telecommunications, because we wanted to be, as our name implies, all encompassing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We wanted to maintain integrity or consistency and continuity as far as our core value. Our core value is competition. Mm-hmm. But we wanted that to encompass all networks, all technologies, all new entrants, all competitors. Mm-hmm. And to do that, we thought CompTel limited who we are and how we define ourselves, because we wanted to represent leading internet companies, and today we do. We wanted to represent not only CLECs and wholesale and resale, but we also wanted to be fiber and wireless and satellite and all types of network facility-based companies. And we wanted to be part of the cloud revolution and to advocate for the things that led to the over-the-top and the streaming industry. And so as we looked strategically, if we were going to survive, and this was the question, would we survive? Because the market and the laws were all changing rapidly. Mm-hmm. And if we didn't expand and diversify and have a name that captured our core value, but the changing, all-encompassing forms of competition and networks, we thought that we might not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we wanted to reposition. We wanted to redefine who we were, and it was hard at first. And there was a lot of loyalty to the old, right. The year past that was CompTel.
Right.
And it took, I think, 3 to 5 years really for our new identity and name to take root. Mm-hmm. And today I can look back and see that it was very successful. We were able to really expand and diversify our membership. And so we have companies like Microsoft and Google and Amazon and Facebook, Twitter, Netflix on the internet content side, driving the demand now to our network side, which are leading fiber companies, tower companies, wireless companies, fixed wireless. We still have a core, great part of our association of the CLECs and emerging cloud-based companies. Mm-hmm. And so we really were successful that our name reflects our membership, and our membership represents our name. And we were able to maintain the core mission and purpose of the organization. It is both aspirational and definitional. So
Yeah, I think that's
internet and competitive networks, but encompasses
yeah.
all networks.
I think that is something that I actually encounter a more often than you'd think in working with brands who, at the time in 1998 or whenever, you have to have somebody visionary. A lot of times it's a CEO. Sometimes the CEO is an engineer, and they're not, necessarily that visionary. But you have to have somebody on the front end that can think about not just what we're doing today, but what we can be. I say all the time, and I mentioned this to you, I do an audit or an assessment, know, grow, scale. What phase are you in? Because a lot of times people are trying to scale and they haven't even grasped who they are, their identity. So, and I think that it's okay to give business leaders permission to take a step back sometimes and think, this might be okay for today, but is it going to position us for who we want to be in a decade or 20 years from now or whatever? So I think that's smart. It always comes with heartburn. It always comes with opinions. I can't tell you that I've ever been through a rebrand where there wasn't somebody that was the naysayer, and you've got to have, that. But, seeing on the other side of it, that it has allowed you guys to grow and to really walk into that identity and have opportunities for what's to come still. So it's not a limiting brand name, but that's great.
It's never easy to change, and it usually comes either with crisis or existential challenges.
Yep.
Like how do you continue to grow? How do you reposition for the future?
Yep.
And how do you not get so captured by your past that you're not flexible enough to change for the future? Mm. And so that's the know, grow,
scale
and scale mantra is extremely good, because I think you constantly have to ask the question, who are we? Who do we serve? What is our mission? What is our purpose? And if we know ourselves, I think it then allows us to change and grow.
Yeah.
And once you're growing, the scale comes naturally, but each aspect of that in the management role is a challenge that you have to constantly be reevaluating.
Right. So how does specifically INCOMPAS help? I know you, like you just mentioned, you work with a lot of organizations that are quite large and member organizations, and then a lot of member organizations that I'm honored to work with that are not, household names. So how do you guys help and the growth and support the growth for lean, smaller organizations and larger? What does that look like?
That's the great thing in my work that I really appreciate and enjoy, because it is the new startup. It's the entrepreneur that I think, for me and the INCOMPAS team, our staff, we love meeting, learning, hearing the new entrant, the new story, the new technology, and then being able to partner them with emerging and existing and established companies. How do you partner on the business side? How do we partner in our public policy advocacy and as we build coalitions? And believe it or not, a lot of members of Congress and the FCC respond to new stories and new entrants just like you and I do. Mm-hmm. We're excited about it. This is a new idea, and we want to help them and get them started. And so being able to tell that smaller company story, maybe in a smaller market that has tremendous potential and promise, actually it excites people universally. Mm-hmm. Being able to partner with those smaller new entrant companies, we're the most established, both in our public policy and in the marketplace business relationships, is something that INCOMPAS, I believe, does very well. and it's so true to our roots that we were the first competitors in long distance, the first competitors in local, really were the champions of internet based policy and competition, and in wireless. So it's part of our DNA to be able to partner with those, or really encourage and go out and recruit the smaller companies, because they really strengthen and give, I think, a more authentic, valid story of what we're all about.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. So what does a day in the life look like for you? It sounds like it's probably ever changing, but, and I do want to, again, in just a second, talk about the show coming up, but that's probably what most of your time right now is getting ready for that. But what does a typical day look like for you as you're kind of supporting a full gamut of member organizations at INCOMPAS?
Well, we have, three core parts of our organization. We have membership. And so the membership is all about continuing or having continuous communication with our members, as well as recruiting new members into the organization. So a lot of my time is making calls to existing member companies. We have over 80 companies in INCOMPAS, and calling prospective or possibly new member companies to tell who we are and how we can provide value to a company, small or large. Mm-hmm. So one bucket of my time is the constant membership retention and the membership recruitment. And then the second category of the work is the advocacy. And so constant calls with our member companies on coalitions of how do we work the regulatory agencies that determine a lot of the marketplace that our member companies work in. So working with the Federal Communications Commission and the commissioners, working with key members of the House and the Senate and the committees of jurisdiction of our industry, and the staff of those committees and members. So the other category is how do we build coalitions, run campaigns. And so we run major campaigns, for example, on the recently passed infrastructure broadband. Infrastructure bill, where you have historic broadband funding now coming in through each of the states, going down and being awarded over the next year to our member companies. How do we have spectrum policy that allows 5G and wireless companies to be successful in the future? So the next big thing that where my time is dedicated is the policy advocacy, coalitions, campaigning, messaging, and person-to-person relational contact as it relates to our members' public policy advocacy. And then the third that we'll talk about is getting ready for our events, our shows, or our policy summit. And so how do we pick a great location, a great venue? How do we market the event? How do we make sure that everyone knows when, where, and then who are our speakers? What is the content? What are the panels? How do we really facilitate business to business connections and relationships while companies, and whether members or non-members, are coming? So how do we have industry leaders who are very well respected, give the keynotes?
Right.
So the planning and the preparation and the work related to our events is the third area where my time is. Since the pandemic started, my world has changed just like everybody else's, and we do a lot of work virtually now, and it really has transformed my time, or changed my time tremendously. That it has, because of all the good work of competition and telecom networks, we can have this podcast, we can work remotely, we can learn remotely, we can connect. And it really has changed the way I live, work, and travel as a result.
Same. So with the INCOMPAS show coming up in October, I'm excited about it. I'll be there. I've been to several. And, I think what's unique about the show is it is focused, or you guys, and of course I have a little inside because I know a lot of people on your team, but you guys have focused on the importance of the networking and the relationship building to the point where it's not a show that you go and socialize and leave having, no better connections made than you did when you came. And I think that based on the people that I've talked to about why they keep coming back to Encompass, that seems to be one of the major factors, is being able to connect. And, like you were just saying, you've got the little guys and you've got the big guys, and everybody's in the same room and you're having these conversations and workshops. So if you can just tell us a little bit about, where the event is. I don't know if it's too late to register now. I don't think so. I think we're have registrations coming in. So
you can register up to the day that it's
you can walk up. Okay. Well, then when this publishes, I'll make sure that
we're coming out of the pandemic, big public policy, all of the major funding initiatives. This show is shaping up to be our best show in a decade. Yep. So we're very, very excited. We're breaking all the attendance records already as far as registration, our sponsorship and sales,
yep,
our rooms. Everything is better than it's ever been. And so please sign up. It's in Denver at the Sheraton, October 24th through the 26th.
Mm-hmm.
And we're looking forward to a great show with really good content, speakers, industry leaders. But you were talking about earlier, for you, it's about relationship and networking. And that is the defining distinctive of our shows. It is the deal making. It is the business partnerships. It's the relationships that come out of that. And so for our association, our members, our community, gathering and convening now once a year, somewhere around the country. Last year was Las Vegas. This year, Denver. We're looking at Tampa for our next show. It really gives each of our member companies a chance to meet other CEOs, other executives, other entrepreneurs all along the way, other sales and marketing teams of companies. And because of the diversity, it really gives everybody an opportunity to meet someone that can make a deal in multiple parts of your company, mm-hmm, and have strategic relationships for your company. You also have those who are trying to buy and finance and invest in the entrepreneurs and the companies of today and the future. So it really is a great gathering that represents the best of our country. Coming out of the pandemic, I'm very proud. We were the first association that took the pledge to keep America connected during COVID. We were the first association to endorse what became the framework of the infrastructure bill, the broadband funding that will connect every American. Mm-hmm. We like to have a value culture, mm-hmm, of being the first. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we succeed, sometimes we don't.
Which Mississippi doesn't get much credit for. So I think even though you guys aren't technically based in Mississippi, you're in Mississippi. So I think it can.
So we want, our show to reflect that as well.
That's right.
And I believe it does. And I hope that you've gotten a lot out of the show.
I have. And I have, both when I was serving in a CMO capacity at a telecommunications company, and then now that I'm in the marketing world, I really enjoy connecting with people in marketing roles or sales and marketing roles, trying to do better for their organizations and come learn. So I'm excited. So if someone wants to register, they can go to show.encompass.org and register. If they want to find you online, I know you're on Twitter and LinkedIn. So
that is correct.
That's how you find Chip. And you can also look up Encompass on all the social media platforms as well.
And let me put a plug in for Laura. She has become part of the Encompass team, helping us market and message, redesign our website. She is tremendously talented and has formed partnerships with a number of our member companies around the country Again, there's no limitation on what someone from Mississippi or a smaller company or a startup or a tech can do.
Right. That's right. I'm trying to defy all the odds here. Well, thank you, Chip, for your time. I appreciate it. And I will see you in Denver.
Yes. And everybody who's watching this, come to Denver. We look forward to seeing you, and look at INCOMPAS. We'd love you to be a part of our team and our community.